Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson.
When I say the word exclusivity, what does that make you think of? That's right. In today's podcast, I'm going to touch the third rail in AV events. I can't tell you how many conversations in this industry start with some sort of complaint about in-house AV contracts, how in-house exclusivity adversely affects smaller local companies more than larger national suppliers, how it's all so unfair. And conversely, I fully support my clients that pursue in-house relationships as third-party providers. I am not of two minds. We can be frustrated by the lack of access to some venues and at the same time want that business for ourselves. Right? That's the world that we live in. I don't get wound up about this anymore, other than the fact it's frustrating that we haven't come to accept how this all works and what we can do about it. Because after 40 years, the arguments are still the same. The response is still the same. Heck, some of the players haven't even changed, but that's not going to stop me from going over it again. Because some of you are new to the industry, some of you need to be reminded about things that you already know. And the fact is, we got to talk about this every once in a while so we can get it out of our system and get back to business, which is what we should be doing. So consider this podcast your friendly reminder that unless it breaks the law, and we do need laws that protect competition, there is no such thing as unfair competition. Sometimes our strategies for dealing with competition are inadequate. There, I said it. Now, before I dive in, let me just say that if you find yourself more concerned about what your supposed competitor is doing than what you should be doing, then you and I need to have a conversation, right? Focusing on the competition is, I believe, probably the most unproductive use of your management time. And I can think of a lot of better ways to spend that time than worrying about what the competition is going to do. Worry about what you need to do, right? Now, for the uninitiated, what am I talking about today? Here's the deal. Since the dawn of time, audiovisual service companies have contracted with hotels, or conversely, hotels have contracted with audiovisual service companies and convention centers to be the primary or even exclusive AV service provider for that property. The AV company typically pays a commission, which could be an arguably large amount, or more accurately, the venue withholds a commission when they transfer the guest payment to the AV provider, right? In some cases, the guest pays the AV provider, who then remits the commission to the venue, but either way, AV services become a profit center for the venue. Just like a restaurant. Stay with me here. This is basic outsourcing. You see, that venue could easily provide the AV services themselves by purchasing the equipment and hiring folks to sell and deliver that service. It's gone on for years. There was an entire company called MVP that helped hotels do this. They were very good at it. While this is not as commonplace as it used to be, there are still venues that do this. But at some point, the venue's depth of capabilities will play out and the outside AV providers will need to step in to support the guests. The benefit to the venue, okay, the venue is the AV company's client. The benefit to the venue of contracting with a larger AV company to provide those services as their preferred or exclusive provider means there is greater capacity and reduced risk that another AV company will do the work, which would cut the hotel out of its profit. Pretty darn simple, right? It's just business. I know sometimes the business is frustrating, right? I appreciate that. But for years, decades, I have listened to everyone in the industry complain about exclusivity agreements that keep some AV providers out of some venues. However, they have every right to do that. Now, here's my position. Because as an advisor, I need to make the business case for dealing with circumstances you cannot change. This is not going to change. So how are you going to live your life differently? Fact. Venue management has the right to control what happens in their building as much as AV providers have the right to pursue customers that may choose to host events in that venue. Now, who do you think has the most power? Well, the venue, if that's doing business that way meets their needs, or the guest, if they control enough of the spending, have a large enough event, they can dictate terms to the venue. You are way down in the food chain as an outside AV provider in this transaction. Bigger players are here. Certain AV companies have found their way into those conversations. Good for them. That is their business model. So for instance, when you visit a hotel, right? Do you realize that most restaurants and major hotels are operated by third-party companies? I think Marriott's probably the last major hotel chain that still operates a few restaurants in their hotels under the Marriott brand. Most of the restaurants are operated by a third-party company. Now, you sign the check, it goes to the hotel. Obviously, it's in the hotel. There are exceptions, but I bet most of you, if you went to the hotel and said, hey, I want to rent your ballroom to build a pop-up restaurant that would compete with the restaurant that they have down the hallway, you're going to be denied, right? Those restaurants in those hotels, they invest in infrastructure, they decorate it to their brand, they rent the space, they provide a commission to the venue. Why should AV be any different, right? The hotel also has an obligation to its guests. So they want to make sure that that restaurant that is representing the hotel by renting space and serving their clients, and the hotel is feeding clients to them, they're just walking them right up to the door. The hotel has an obligation to make sure that restaurant's doing what they need. Now, I'm going to give you an example from many, many years ago when I was, young man, 17, 18, probably 18, 19 years old, going out to dinner with my girlfriend, whose mother had a very wealthy boyfriend, and he would take us out to the nicest restaurants in town. I was very lucky, and my girlfriend's younger brothers would all come with us. So it was a family dinner with the boyfriend, and his name was Rex. And Rex would sit down. He'd have the best table in the restaurant. The head waiter would come over. Rex would tell him how he wanted the evening. We didn't hear any of this conversation. He would explain how he wanted the evening to go. He always ordered a custom salad, an endive salad that he specified, and it always got delivered perfectly, even though it wasn't on the menu. And then he would ask everybody at the table what they would like to have for dinner as they looked at the menu. Then he would deliver the entire order to the waiter at the appropriate time. Now, one particular dinner with, my girlfriend's ordering the sweetbread special and somebody else is having a filet, and I think I ordered the rack of lamb. Little brother wanted a cheeseburger. Well, we're in a 4.5 star restaurant. The waiter said, sir, we don't have cheeseburgers. And this part of the conversation we all heard because he said it a little bit louder. He turned to the waiter and said, there's a restaurant down the hallway and there's another one down the street that serves cheeseburgers. Go get the man a cheeseburger, right? The kid got the cheeseburger. End of story, right? In AV terms, sometimes the venue is going to have to defer to the guest and let them bring in the team that will make their event successful, right? The lesson here is simple. The guest decides what is right. Discerning guests will usually get their way. My advice to you, align yourself with discerning buyers, and all of a sudden exclusivity is just going to vaporize. But back to the issue, because I know not all of you are in that position. Just because we have to live with the situation, okay? Remember, venue-based AV companies resent outsiders as much as outside companies resent them. Let's reframe this argument to make the best of things on both sides. There are pros and cons to venue AV contracts in the industry, right? Pros, convenience. As a customer, in-house AV meeting support makes my life easier. I'm a buyer. I often will use in-house AV to do the small things, right? Con, in-house providers often are not as adept, innovative, or skilled at large events as outside providers. For my larger events, I always bring in an outsider. I make sure I book a venue that will let me do that. Pro, the guest gets one bill and can negotiate a bigger purchase. A major event, they can negotiate down AV costs while spending more on food and beverage. We've got 400 room nights You need to comp the internet fees. There's so many things that a buyer can do by having everything bundled into one purchase. Con? Well, costs. Adding commission and leveraging exclusivity adds significant cost to the guest. Not to mention the service fees that get tacked on top of everything. Right? Pro? Depth. A third-party provider with deep resources can serve more guests' needs. This also improves the profit for the venue, but the con of this is that local companies lose out, right? National companies, most AV companies that want to follow their customers, but it sucks when you can't support a local show because of venue exclusivity, right? Many in-house providers are national companies and they're squeezing out local providers. But to be fair, the hotel operators are also national companies. So look, do the pros outweigh the cons? That's ultimately up to the guest, right? Now, the elephant in the room, and the reason this conversation keeps coming up, is that there are some questionable practices in pricing that do happen when the venue wants to force the guest to work with the in-house AV provider. There are internet access, rigging, power, shadow technicians, to name a few. These practices, let's be frank, they do not reflect well on our segment, but the venues that support these practices are as much to blame as the third-party providers that contract with the venues. And we can debate whether these are bad faith practices or whether these bad faith practices are pervasive or they're isolated, but pay attention to what the professional meeting planning groups are doing. They hold the buying power and could use everyone's support, and they are teaching their members how to negotiate better deals, how to make this relationship work for everyone. My point is, the concept of in-house AV is inherently good. It's a good business model to be in if you're an AV provider. It is good for the venue to have that relationship. It is good for the buyer in most cases. The execution is not always perfect. Let's face it, none of us are. Ultimately, the guest has the power to choose venues and negotiate services. So, if you are the outside provider, after years and years and years of circular arguments, the solution remains that you have to do a better job of educating your client, educating event planners about what you do and how to make sure they can use you for mission critical work. They need to know how to find those clauses and how to negotiate them. And it's not always going to work if their buying power isn't big enough. And if you're the in-house provider, protect your space by not punching above your weight. If you get out of your league, if you try and take on general sessions that are beyond your capabilities, you're not only going to make yourself look bad, you're going to make your customer unhappy, the venue's not going to be happy. Work with outside providers, subcontract to them if you will, by taking care of the show elements that best fit your profile. Serve your customer instead of undermining competition. Ignoring the competition and supporting the industry goes both ways, right? So, if you're an outside AV provider and your customer sent you an RFP or request that they had no right to offer you because they signed a contract with an exclusive venue, be grumpy at your client for signing a bad contract. When all is said and done, everyone wants repeat customers. Do right by the buyer and everybody wins. Rising tide will lift all boats. Thanks for listening to my Tom Talk today. Have a great week.
If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimpson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimpson.com for more information.